Hello and welcome back to the Cambrian Virtual Show. My name is Paul Davis.
And I'm Joe Longbourn. Hello.
Did we do the right intro?
Yeah, I think we should try another one another time just for the hilarity of getting it wrong as per usual.
Okay, we'll try something really complex tomorrow then. Something
we should do it in Welsh.
Definitely. You've said it now as well. Okay, tomorrow we attempt
NUE.
Wales. Thank you all for joining. It's always lovely to see you here live. So please let us know that you're watching live. Put in a hello. Put in a selected emoji.
Yeah, we had the umbrella earlier. So what should we have next? Oh, something music related. Given that Pete is a music photographer.
Yeah.
I think that'd be cool.
Yeah,
just any musical instrument you want to find.
So find some music emojis, stick them in, let us know that you're watching live. It's always always most appreciated. Had a lovely conversation this morning with Sam.
We did.
Absolutely brilliant. Talking about some of the new lenses that Sigma has released.
And more importantly than all of that, magnetic lens caps, which are pure genius.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what they're like in real life.
Yeah. So once again, getting more excited about little accessories, actual gear. Sounds about right.
Standard.
So in a second, we're going to introduce Peter. And then later on, we've got our good friend Gary Jones coming in and talking a little bit about his experiences in Safari, I believe. So
that'd be cool.
That's going to be awesome. So you can go over to our website and see everything related to the Virtual Winter Show on our website, which is cambrianphotos.co.uk. Click on the guest speakers, there's a whole list up there. And you can either rewatch some of the videos that are already up or schedule any to go live as well. So absolutely fantastic. Cool. There we go.
Just to go to our comments.
Yes.
I have not been undersold on the old emojis.
There we go.
Good afternoon, Steve. That is a good amount of emojis there. There's like a keyboard, a drum, a guitar, a trumpet, a banjo, a violin, and a trombone, I think. And then Gary did it as well. Oh. That's very clever. He's done a camera, music, and then a violin. So it's like music, photography, photographing music.
You're getting experimental here now. I like it.
Oh, and Lynn says, "Afternoon, chaps. Don't tell anyone I've got you on as I'm at work." That's great. Good to see you.
We'll let you in on a little secret. We're supposed to be working too.
Paul's got Netflix set up on a TV to the side.
Just off to the side. I think it's about time that we welcome in,
definitely.
Pete.
Here we go.
Hi, how are you?
Peter, how are you?
Hi, I just have to circle back to emojis. I was very pleased when I noticed that nobody had put in my most hated instrument, which is a recorder, because I just despise it. It just popped into my head for the first time in years. As a kid once, because I was made learn it in school, I stole my brother's paint stripper heat gun, melted down my recorder so I could tie it into a knot, presented it to my parents and said, now make me play it. So, So anyway, that's a bit of a segue to start with. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
That's like a recorder pretzel by the sounds of it.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's probably the only instrument that does deserve to be melted down.
It's true.
So, and I don't care if I get flack off anyone about it.
We're gonna have like recorder fans like hitting us up in the comments.
We'll start the war. The war starts now.
Oh dear. So this is Pete Neill, who is he's a photographer, videographer, and you educate people. So
my kids, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, but your talk the other day was good. You could have learned a lot from that if you listened. That Panorama thing is cool.
Yeah,
we'll have to.
We'll be getting into that a little bit,
exactly.
Later on.
But that was very cool.
I do enjoy. Like, there is a good amount of kind of seminars and talks I do, and I do enjoy that. It's kind of one of the things when I got into photography seriously and then started doing this kind of thing. I kind of expected to not like it, but you kind of get to the point where you enjoy it and you enjoy the feedback and the questions once you get over the initial terror for the first 8 times that I did it.
That's cool. So I guess if we start with a brief overview of who you are, just in case people weren't able to watch your episode on Friday, and if you didn't get to watch the episode on Friday, definitely go and watch it. His shots are fantastic and definitely make you think differently about trying to get shots that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to achieve, or you perhaps wouldn't have thought were possible potentially. So who are you, Pete?
So good question. No, I'm living in London. I'm from Ireland. Moved over to the UK in 2012. I work primarily in music industry photography, kind of on the road with bands, backstage, tour bus, studio. Anywhere essentially related to music. I do a certain amount of stuff in photo studio as well, but I guess my main work is live stuff and that whole environment that comes with it. Kind of my main kind of clients are probably like The Script and Rick Astley and Justin Timberlake and Elbow, and I've been very lucky to work with a kind of a range of artists like that. But yeah, it's really kind of fun. I got into it kind of by accident. In a way, it was where I worked in wedding photography in kind of the late 2008, 2007, 2008, and I got into that during the financial crisis at the time. Previously, I'd been in IT, and I got into weddings and discovered that I was useless at them because I was just too high pressure, and so much admiration to anyone who does them. And then got into music by trying to find a way to still love photography and try and make an income from it. And saw an advertisement for a graphic design job in a company, in a graphic design company that was owned by U2, and got this contract there for a couple of weeks and managed to meet this guy called Steve Averill who named U2, and he got me my first photo pass, which was shooting U2 in Sheffield in 2009, and I shot that and then did not much for a year because it was kind of like firefighting with the financial crisis back home in Ireland at the time. And 2010 shot U2 again. I was very lucky to get a Billboard cover from that. Some of this I think may have been in the other video that we did for any guys who've seen it. But and then they kind of used that portfolio to kind of start learning the skills in small venues and stuff over the course of a couple of years until picking up client. I guess the Script was the first big client after that, and kind of took it from there. So it's been a bizarre journey with lots of twists and turns, but it took a while to make it my main source of income, but we've got there, thankfully.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a lot different. And once again, I think you mentioned it in the talk about, because it's not just sort of turning up to a gig and whoever's playing, you're shooting them that night. So you're not covering a venue, are you? You're covering, as you said, a client. So you sort of travel with them and.
Yeah, you're absolutely. It's more, you're covering more the experiential side. So it's not that your job starts when you arrive at the venue. It's kind of this just transition between. So whether it be on the tour bus or a quiet moment backstage, I mean, it's just as important when you're working with bands directly. It's just as important to know when to put the camera away and when to leave the room. And you do very often, and I do with all my main clients. I've developed good relationships with them and become very good friends with them. But even then, I need to know when to put the camera away and them to know that I respect their downtime too. So that's a big part of what allows someone to be successful, apart from all the technical stuff.
Has that been something that happened quite quickly for you, or do you feel like it took you a while to get to that point where you could kind of understand the nuances of the conversation and who they were as people to know when to kind of back off?
Yeah, that's probably the first time I've ever been asked that. I found that quite natural getting that, and I'll tell you why. I had kind of a slightly bizarre upbringing. That my dad was very high profile in church and politics in Ireland, so I was always used to like people. Like I remember, once meeting Desmond Tutu at the front door of the house, and he'd arrived at the house, and it was, so it was like, and as a kid, and so it was really bizarre. So I had learnt about I guess I'd see my dad working with public figures, and and about the way he would know how to handle that. So I think through osmosis, that really helped me at the start. But I was by no means expert at it. I remember at one particular gig I was doing, where I was kind of in the dressing room, and I had probably taken 500 shots more than I need to.
Right.
And this is very early on, and the artist said to me, "I think you got enough," and I was right. I was like, I think you're right. So it does take time.
Sure. That's interesting, though, to know that. Well, I suppose for some people, it's very obvious that photographers have to be great people.
Yeah.
Like portraiture is one of the ones. Wedding photography is massive as well, to be able to build up that relationship and that all-important trust. Landscape photographers, maybe not, because the trees aren't going to talk, hopefully.
Sure, we'll find someone to disagree with that.
Yeah. Unless they've been smoking something, maybe. I don't know.
Or eating the mushrooms.
Yeah, the mushrooms.
Wow.
But I think it's interesting to hear that whilst your skills as a photographer have improved as well, your ability to understand your subject and that kind of environment has developed as well. And I guess it's reassuring to know that you don't have to be perfect straight off and still be able to work with massive clients like you do and have a longevity of career in terms of that relationship with those clients. Like, it's not you've worked with U2 once, they didn't like you, so they never worked with you again, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, and I'm very grateful for that. I mean, I think you have to, when you're around someone for that amount of time, mistakes are going to happen, no matter what your role, no matter what your job. I mean, I don't think any of us can say in whatever our job is that we haven't made a mistake in the last week. So whether it be small or large. So I think you just have to own it at the end of the day, and they know you're human, they're human. At the end of the day, they appreciate being treated like a human and not like a celebrity very often.
Yeah.
So they're more willing to treat you like a human if they're receiving it from you.
Sure, that makes sense. So have you found it odd over the span of your career, from working in Sheffield at that gig, and then going around on tour with them? Has that made it easier or harder? And you mentioned you've got kids, so how does that work with like family life and being away on work? How does that pan out?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is definitely one of the challenges. I mean, I tend to these days, if I am going away with a band, there's no real need to do the whole tour, and really there isn't the budget these days for us generally to bring someone for the whole tour. So very often you only need to go for a couple of weeks. I mean, like for argument's sake, if I'm on the road with the script, I'll have a look at the venues and the dates and find out what's the best run of a couple of weeks that gets me the most venues in their key areas. So that might be one run, and then you might fly out to one or two additional tentpole dates, later in the tour or something like that, or a final night of the tour, etc. So that makes it a bit more doable with family, for sure. One of the reasons moving to London has been great is that a lot of my work takes place in London, which is great. So I come home in the evening, because a lot of the recording is done here. I mean, I know some recording can often, places like Birmingham I go up to, and Manchester as well, quite a bit, with like for elbow related stuff. I might head up there. But if I was in any other city in the world, I'd be traveling an awful lot more than I am.
Sure.
Much to the relief of my wife.
Yeah. and so you go on tour and you choose like a great run. Do you also choose whether you want to photograph the band or the artist based on the actual type of show or the type of venue it's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much case by case. I mean, if for argument's sake you're in an arena where the show can look the same different nights, although the show looks the same from a given perspective, I would tend to try and use different gear on different nights. instead. And that gives me a very different experience and stops me not being bored, but just trying the same shot again and again. Because although in your head, like for argument's sake, say I for 3 nights at a particular venue with the same band, the same show more or less, and if I have a 24-70 the first night, or say an ultra wide, yeah, or whatever, either the case, on the second night, if I'm using that same gear, I'm probably going to get a very similar shot. You know, when the big explosion of fireworks goes off, I'm probably going to try and do another wide, and it's just going to look, which of these two is better? But if I have forced myself into a corner by having an 85mm on at that particular moment, I'm going to be taking a totally different kind of shot. I might be way at the back over people's heads trying to get, you know, the blur of hands in the air with the pyrotechnics going off behind the stage. So you're forcing yourself to be creative, and I've always loved it. I love limitation as a way of forcing creativity. Back when I only used to, I guess I had a bit of what I call 24-70 ISIS at one point, where I essentially would just zoom and click rather than moving and working the shot. And falling in love with prime lenses, specifically the 85 focal length, was what really taught me. Is what kind of gave me a sense of composition I literally didn't have or own before. And I guess an interesting thing was what taught me my sense of composition was a trip to San Francisco with my wife. Before I got into gig stuff, I had a 24-70, and I had bought an 85 when I got to San Francisco in a camera store when I got there, like second day of the trip. And that was the only lens I used for the rest of the trip. And so all these bizarre pictures of landmarks, and with my wife in landmarks, I was like contorting myself to these bizarre positions to get said landmark in picture with my other half or something like that. And I came back with a sense of composition I'd never had before. So it was, but I do remember I shot a friend's baptism or their kid's baptism shortly after I got back, and they were like, "Why are these pictures all at weird angles?" And I was like, "Yeah, I may have a problem."
That's great.
Yeah,
it's something to pick up on, though, isn't it? To think about, even if you're a landscape photographer or a sports photographer, if you're always using a certain focal length, then go and grab a different one and force yourself to use.
Think that you're on day 3 of doing that same shot. Yeah. So, because once again, like Peter's in like you've got an amazing band in front of you, you've got this big view, you're going to get the best shot available. Yeah. It just screams at you. And it's the same with like a landscape, the sunset, the lights going in there, but then actually thinking that, that's quite obviously, the shot, but there's got to be something else there, and putting those limitations on things like, that Sony 85mm, which is a lovely lens.
Yeah, it is.
I adore that lens. Yeah.
And putting a limitation on like that is, and finding those different angles is brilliant. Yeah,
because I suppose also, especially if you're doing, let's say, like 3 nights, you can almost do all your safe shots and get them in the bag on the first night, so you've got them, and you'll have gone back and looked through them and gone, I like that shot. Oh, that would be cool. Like if you've been on 24-70 and then you're like, oh, I need 85 to get that shot, or I need a 135 or 70-200 to get that shot because I want that extra like zooming in effect, or you know what I mean, like, or actually if I could get a super wide shot of this whole like gig, it would look amazing. And I suppose like there's a safety in that, isn't there?
Oh, there is, and what you're saying is the key to remaining creative in an arena tour environment, because it's very easy for night 3 to look the same as night 10 if you don't impose those limitations on yourself, and so that increases the value to the client, because when they start seeing different stuff each night, they're more likely to keep you on for longer, for the tour. So if I'm needing to go back go back home after 2 weeks, I'm like, I'll just start giving them crap shots. No, I won't. That's bad. No, that's not advice. Hashtag do not do this. But
did you find that you've ever had a shot that, like, on the first night you tried to get, it didn't quite work, or you thought, oh, if I take that shot a bit earlier, maybe at the beginning of the show, or like on a certain song where they have the lights in a certain way and they've got like smoke or whatever. Do you feel like there's ever been a shot where you've had to work on it for like 2 or 3 nights just to get it the way that you wanted it to?
Oh, 100%. There's a shot basically, which is it was a tour poster for the script in 2014, 2015, where they're jumping in the air on stage. And do you have that in the folder there?
Yeah, it was in the. I haven't got it to hand, but it was in the video that we.
Okay, so people can go back and check. People can go back and check out the video.
And watch the video. Look back at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but essentially, it took 5 nights to get that shot, because I'm just going to check if I can bring it up in my Dropbox. Whilst we're checking, can you still see me?
Yeah. I think that's reassuring, though, isn't it, for like people watching this to know that you don't always have to get that shot first time. Like even the pros struggle to get that.
Yeah, well,
shot.
that's exactly it. So it is just
Although
I have it on my desk.
I mean, you say it's a bit harder. I would say there's fors and against, isn't it? Because like we understandably wedding photography is hard. So, but it is one day and you get to do it. But with like shots that you have in mind, they're normally times where you can go into somebody and go, oh yeah, just move a little bit, and we're just going to move over to this tree here and stuff like that.
It's more like situational.
Yeah, and
I've just put that in the private chat, by the way. Sorry, my bad. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, mate. If you want to stick that, you can pick that up on screen if you want. I'll just talk through some of the stuff with that shot, because it is quite interesting, the process with that, because it definitely went wrong 4 times more than it went right.
1 second. There we go.
Yeah, that's the one. So basically, on the first night of taking that shot, it was just the drummer and Danny with a bit of his arm cut off. It was the end of the gig, at the end of a song called Hall of Fame, and I showed it to the band after, and Mark, the guitarist on the right, said, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool to try and get me in shot as well? It could be good for the tour poster." So I took the very subtle hint, and basically the next night we tried it. It didn't quite work. We got everyone in roughly the same kind of poses they're in now, but the light was strobe and it was off at the key moment, because the lights were strobing on the stage. So for the third night, I chatted to the lighting technician and he turned off the strobe for that particular moment of the set, so it was constant light. But on the third night, Danny, a couple of minutes before, had given Danny, the lead singer, an Irish flag, which he wore kind of behind his shoulders. If you imagine in that shot, there's a flag covering his whole upper body. It ended up it was a flag with legs. I'm like, that's not good either. So, So on the fourth night, I screwed up and just said the focus wasn't quite right. I had not, as I was flicking, because I had a manual focus for the, and I had knocked the lens and knocked it out of focus. So that was a useless. And then finally on the fifth night, which is this, it worked. So
that's insane. Yeah, the story behind that. So I love how obviously they're performing, and I mean I don't know how many people would be in the stadium at this point. I mean
it was outdoors actually. Yeah, it was. They were supporting One Republic on a tour around the States.
Right. So it would have been a big gathering there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just between you, it's just like, oh yeah, there's loads of people here, but we're just going to try and get this shot. Yeah, I think that's exactly. Really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's really cool. How
it was cool. And
with the artist, even though that they're performing as well, they've just got that.
They're doing like a second performance, aren't they? Like they're doing the musical and the visual for the crowd, but then they're doing a visual performance for you, the photographer, to get a shot that they know they'll use in the future.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly it. And it's great work. I mean, they're especially good to work with because it's kind of like really strong trust with them. Like I travel when I'm on tour with them, I sleep on the band's bus. So it's it's a three, it's those three guys and myself on one bus, and then there's a whole other bus, obviously with well, at least two buses with crew and equipment and all that kind of stuff. But
Sure.
it's great having that access because I mean I get pictures on the bus, those little moments, whether it be just because they even have a little recording studio at the back when they're on tour, which is great. Yeah, so it's nice having that trust and look through images with them after a gig at 2 a.m. and that kind of stuff.
And it's still ringing in your ears.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
I want to pick up on something you mentioned just a second ago about getting that shot and how the light was strobing. Do you think it's important for you to build a relationship, obviously not just with the artist, but with the whole crew as a whole, so that you can execute shots that you want in the future?
It's two reasons. One, definitely 100% well, three reasons actually. One, definitely in order to execute shots, you often need to collaborate, whether it be with someone allowing you onto the stage or like in this case, adjusting the lighting, or maybe making sure a particular stairway is clear for me to go up at a particular moment, something like that. All of those things are key to getting the shot. Second is just and people like working with people that they like working with. So getting to know the crew has to function like a functional family on tour, because you're around each other an awful lot. And so it's kind of part and parcel of the job is being good, playing well with others. To be honest, like it's
kids to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So I need to record this and say that to my kids. But so that's definitely a big part of it. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, what was it now? Oh, it'll come to me in a minute anyway. But yeah, to answer your question directly, it is kind of very, very much key in developing those relationships. But equally, actually, and that was the other thing I was going to say, it can actually open a lot of doors for work, because if I'm trying to work with a new client, there's a lot of different entry points you can use to get that work, and a lot of them people don't think about. So you have to bear in mind that at any given gig, you have stage designers who've designed the stage. You have, if it's say a boy band or a girl band, there'll be stylists who are heavily involved. There'll be obviously the lighting company, security company, even the people who make the sound desk, or people who make the bass amps, or the lead guitarist guitar. All these different brands that are associated. All of those brands are entry points into an ecosystem whereby you can approach, or for instance, the firm that handles the social media for the band, that's another. They're all entry points into an ecosystem, which you can approach and then say, would you like me to cover this gig? Send them some samples. They can send the management some samples that you send them, but they already know them. They potentially get you some work. The band have to review the images before that company uses them. So you suddenly have opportunities for going across the ecosystem and getting introduced to, whether it be the merchandise company or the band themselves, if I didn't develop those relationships, I probably wouldn't have half the work I have now.
That's very cool. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how you kind of learn over time that you should be nice to everybody, because you never know when somebody might help you out in a way you never expect. And I also want to pick up on, you mentioned set design. Have you ever a set designer ever come to you and say what would look cool visually, or have you ever been to a set designer and say, oh, on the next show, could you twist that slightly or that higher or lower so that I can get this shot? Is that?
Yeah, I have. I mean, for instance, the one, I guess, the best example is a company called Mirad, who do production design and lighting design, and I've done a lot with them on various clients. But I've had the opportunity, as a result of that, to see early stages of designs for tours and feedback on them, and suggest ideas and say, hey, I saw this on another tour. What if we did that? And it's just to throw ideas into a pot, and some of them might lead to something, and some of them might not. But it's great to get that kind of early access, which is because it makes it kind of gives me more opportunities to get content. It being a lot of my job is very reactive, obviously, but the more creative input you get, you can amplify what you can do.
Yeah, no, definitely.
That is cool. You mentioned in the Friday one about doing video as well.
Yes.
How do you combine those at the show on the tours, or are you just focused on photography and somebody else is doing video work? How does that work in terms of the two parts?
Well, very often I have two bodies on me. So right now I use a Sony A7R4 and a Sony A7R3. For especially low light environments, I have a third camera, which is an A7S2 that I'll probably upgrade to an A7, the S3 at some point, when gigs resume, please God. But so very often if I am using the two bodies, sometimes I'm using the two bodies just to give me two focal lengths at hand. But there are occasions where I'm using it so I can quickly switch to video. There might be that over the course of several nights, I'm grabbing snippets from each gig to assemble into a BTS reel. It might mean that I literally only need to record, a minute and a half every night. But if you do that over 10 nights of 10 different things that are happening, combined with backstage footage, you suddenly got the making of a good, 3.5 minute BTS that you can give the client that they can use on social feeds to help drive ticket sales, for instance. So that is a big part of it. I mean, sometimes you do dedicate specific nights, especially on longer tours. I'll have a night where I literally just do video. There might be a situation where I'll put a camera stick it on PP7, which I tend to use, a picture profile on the A7S2, stick it on the sound desk on a tripod, record it in 4K, and use one of the many techniques to enable the removal of the 30-minute recording limit, which are which are quite handy, and then you end up having some great footage of the gig, and sometimes you do it without even the client specifically asking for it. And they end up, being really glad to have some really nice footage where the highlights aren't blowing out, even when the lights are going nuts. I do obviously work in video stuff outside of the live gig environment. I do a certain amount of. I've directed a few music videos with both kind of smaller unsigned acts who I've got to know, and also I've done a couple with Rick Astley, which has been most bizarre of which was a one called "She Makes Me," which is featuring a little yellow Reliant 3-wheeler and him beating the crap out of it. So that was very, very fun. He was way too willing to do that, by the way. But yeah, I would categorize myself as more mainly a stills person who's evolved into kind of embracing video over the last couple of years, and the technologies have improved so much. One particular thing that's kind of really revolutionized low budget music videos for me is using, for instance, I shot a video with a band called Bridges recently, and I had a little stabilizer with the A7R4 on it, and having the IAF on video on the A7R4 was phenomenal, because I was able to move back and forward and where I wanted to for the shot and not require a focus puller who we couldn't afford for the day, because it was a low budget video. And so it really was, things like technology advances like that make my job a lot easier, because you can do an awful lot more on your own, which is key to my job, being able to do end-to-end work, on my own.
Do you find that things like IAF and not having to necessarily work with a focus puller means you can get into places or have or get footage that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to?
Yeah, because you can be more dynamic and take opportunities in much the same way that I take opportunities with my stills, and particularly with the clients I know well. Like, for argument's sake, with Rick or with the script or with Elbow, they trust me enough to go onto the stage and and go behind the band at a particular moment and to make that judgment call myself, whether it's worth it or not, and if it's and knowing what are appropriate moments to do that and what are not appropriate moments. So being able to in those scenarios be able to work with video or stills in quite an easy manner is fantastic. I mean, other times I'll sometimes put obviously I might ask the sound desk technician to record an MP3 of the front of house audio, for they might be doing a multi-track recording, so I have the instruments and even have a mic on the crowd, which can be quite nice for having ambient stuff after, and that can make my job easier as well. Or sometimes I'll put, maybe if I'm filming from the back of the stage and behind the drum kit, all you can hear in my camera mic is the drums. Bear in mind, in a BTS it might have a voiceover anyway, you might not be using the audio, but I have a little Zoom mic that I can put somewhere, hide somewhere on the stage, and just click recording, just to get me some kind of audio if I don't have an option from the sound desk,
Sure.
So there's a lot you can do on your own.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It goes along, I suppose, with that relationship situation as well. If you wanted to have to get other people involved, and you said being able to go behind the drum kit or get into places you wouldn't normally. Do you think differently when you shoot video, or do you see shots similarly as you would when you're trying to get a photograph?
Oh, well, for me, I think very differently, and it took me a while. And I mean, you're always still learning with stills or video, but I guess I'm more conscious of my learning with video, because it's probably not as advanced as my learning with stills, because I haven't been doing it anywhere near as long. But yeah, with stills, you have the luxury of not having to capture every frame in between two key moments, whereas, and I know with editing you can jump cut between things, but with video, if you're wanting to capture something, you're not just thinking about one still, you're thinking about 7 seconds worth of 25 frames per second, potentially. Sure. So it is quite a different thing. Obviously, with regards, pulling back, even if you are shooting in, a log format, the ability to pull back highlights and push, and deal with shadows is not as great as it is with stills. At least not in my experience, although it is quite powerful what you can do. So there are different sets of restrictions you have to be aware of. It might be the case that, even if you're shooting, obviously you get a lot of light potentially if you're shooting it, at 1/50th of a second for video versus a still where you might be shooting a much higher shutter speed. But you have to accept with that an individual frame, when you pause it, is not going to be as sharp as a still would be. So and you can't always assume that your clients understand all these different factors. So you have to kind of work. And then there's the other angle as well with, certain LEDs might behave well as stills, but terrible on a video at a particular frame rate, or vice versa. Yeah. So there's lots of stuff that, I've had to learn. And even, the biggest single thing was learning how to shoot log. And, I kind of settled on PP7, Picture Pro, or S-Log2 is the main thing that I shoot in. But it's for anyone who is keen to get into video, that's probably with their current hardware that they have for stills. One of the first things you need to do is probably just learn a bit how to shoot log, and then take it from there, because it opens up a lot of opportunities for what you can do in post.
Sure.
Some good advice.
Yeah, definitely.
Video, I think
100%. I think video is a very exciting way of telling a story. But if you've come from a very strong single image background, and then having to think in time as well, and all of those other variables, it does make, even just learning to put, if you wanted a 5-second shot to record 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after, so you've got enough to slide around and be able to chop it or fade it if that's the way you're going to go. And then audio is a massive part of video that people don't realize. They can produce something stunning visually, and then the audio just is awful. Quickly. It's distorted, and there's no depth to it. And especially for music, it's not like spoken word. Spoken word is relatively easy to get right, unless it's for a very long period of time.
Unless it's us.
But for a band, the sound is their signature, isn't it? So if you screw that up, it doesn't matter how good the visuals look, you're kind of stuffed, because
Yeah.
you may as well show it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, 'cause
100%.
Yeah, like you'll have ruined their signature almost.
Yeah.
So speaking about kind of that trust that you've built up with bands over time, do you have any situations or moments where it's kind of gone a bit south in you, or not? I don't know whether it's been awkward for you or whether you've done something and you're like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that, or like, have you been the person who's pulled out a cable by accident?
Like, sorry, how long have we got? 2
hours?
Yeah, I think maybe 9 might cover it. No, I've had a few. A couple that spring to mind. I remember I was in Gibraltar with a band called Lawson, who recently reformed. And Andy, the lead singer, and I had got up early one morning to walk up to the top of the rock. And it was like pretty early in the morning. It was like 6:30. And we were walking up, and we were quite high up at this point. And out of nowhere, a monkey drops out of a tree and lands on my back. Monkey in your back, literally. Proceeds to unzip my backpack and grab a lens, which was a Sigma 15mm fisheye. Anyone who has one has got a really tough metal hood, and that was key to this story. And lamps it down the hill. Now, anyway, so throws it down the hill.
Like a cricketer just down the hill.
Yes, exactly. And I was like, what the hell? Because I hadn't seen, it was Andy who'd seen the monkey properly. All I knew was there was something on top of me, opening my back. And and so Andy, anyone who knows that he's incredibly tall and lanky, and so he looks like that guy in Star Trek Discovery, that really tall lanky captain. He's basically a human version of him, and he just starts running down the hill after this thing, and by miraculous, because it's like this tight corner, so it would have just gone over the barrier or under the barrier or maybe banged off it, but he manages to catch it just before it gets to the barrier, before I would have lost it permanently. And the hood was totally bent and bent in, but because it's a metal hood, I was able to bend it back. That lens worked for another 3 years after that until I sold it.
Wow.
I didn't tell the buyer the story. Gotta love Facebook Marketplace. No, the lens worked great.
That's a good advert for Sigma. We spoke to them earlier. We were speaking to Sam from Sigma, and they brought out a new range of primes, or added to it. They already had the 45mm out, and he was saying that the hood is made out of the same material as the rest of the lens. So that's good to know that Sigma lens is bound for monkey's chocolate.
I think the monkey worked for the Sony ambassador program.
Yeah.
You must use Sony glass.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I definitely probably won't approach Sigma with that. Don't think Sony would be too happy with me. But I would love if Sony, if you want to send me to Gibraltar to get some monkeys to throw the lenses down the road, I'm game.
Ultimate review video. Getting monkeys in Gibraltar to help you launch stuff.
I had one other disaster, which I was very green in the job. It was my first time going to America. My second or third time doing a job for the script, and they were in Radio City Music Hall, and there was a particular point in the gig where I was supposed to get a picture from the back of the stage, and I had agreed with the lighting technician that a particular light was going to be off at a particular point because it's a very brightly lit stage, so I could make my way stealthily across. But there was a couple of fatal flaws to that plan. One was that the lighting technician forgot to turn this light off, so I ended up trapped behind this drum kit for 10 minutes. And the drummer pissing himself laughing. But the other problem, because I was so green in this, I had worn, I always wear dark clothes now. I'm just going to clarify. I always wear dark clothes in a gig. But I had worn a red and a white stripy t-shirt on top, all down the arms as well.
Perfect shot. Where's Wally?
Where's Wally? And so there was a couple of things that happened. That was one of the things that happened. So eventually Danny rescued me from behind the drum kit, and came over and basically, not escort me, but just signal me as fine, go across. But later that same gig, there's this little walkway up the side wall of the Radio City Music Hall. It's like a staircase that goes up the wall, but with no barrier. And there's always two security people standing at the tops of it. And I had chatted to security beforehand that I wanted to go up one of these, even though, and I would stay to the wall, and even though there was no barrier, I wasn't going to fall off, blah, blah, blah. I didn't fall off, let me get that clear. But I went up to take this picture from there, and the security guy obviously hadn't read the memo. I don't know whether he'd not been at the briefing, because it was mentioned in the security briefing before the gig. But he had a conniption. He was like, "What are you doing here?" And people were starting to look up from below because he was giving out to me, and like I was some kind of imposter. So and again, people looking up and seeing this guy in this red and white T-shirt. It's just, yeah. So I'm not sure why I told you.
Maybe they the crew all conspired against you to make sure you never wore a red and white stripy top again.
We'll teach you.
Yeah, well, yeah. I actually still have the top as a souvenir. It's about 4 meters from me, but I'm not getting it. It's never appearing anywhere again.
Yeah. It's just a gentle reminder to go, yeah, that's...
Yeah.
It's nice looking back at moments like that, because it really reflects on sort of how much you've learned about something as well. It's almost like looking back at images that you've done like 10, 15 years ago and gone, oh, I've learned so much from them, like from a technical aspect of shooting. But it also comes with, once again, can be applied to any type of photography. The type of clothes that you wear. You're not going to go up Snowdon in a T-shirt in this weather.
Why, is that something you do?
No. Okay. Get 1,000.
I'm a celebrity. I'm walking up Snowdon in a T-shirt.
I'll tell you, I'll tell my soul to get likes on this. So it's just I've lost train of thought now.
It is reassuring though, because if you're watching this and you go, this guy who works with some massive bands,
that's where I was going.
And he makes these like mistakes, but yet he's still at the top of his game, going. And that you haven't sacked him for it. So, and also I suppose it helps you, like you were saying, like as you look backwards, but also reassuring to say, actually, if I've improved that much over that amount of time, like surely there's even more that I can improve on to achieve even better results. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not like you go, oh yeah, that's it. I've hit, like, I cannot be any better than I am right now. I've reached the apex of my ability, of anybody's ability. I cannot be any better. Whereas
always learning.
If you look back, you can see the improvement. So imagine if I put another 15 years in, like how much better will I be if I've learned so much over the past like 15 years and then another 15 years. Like 30 years of experience is a phenomenal amount of experience in a genre like this, where you can like really be on your game, and a lot of stuff almost becomes autopilot. Like going into your wardrobe, you're gonna pick like really dark clothing and probably wear shoes that are super comfortable and don't squeak or stomp when you walk around on stage and stuff. I don't know, like those things.
100%.
Like,
I have one other funny experience, which I was working at the, what's it called, Apple, what it used to be called, the iTunes Festival. Back when it's called the iTunes Festival. Well, I wasn't specifically working for the iTunes Festival. I was working for Justin Timberlake at a particular night and shooting the gig there. And I mentioned, because I was at the time, because I wasn't yet full time doing this, because when I moved to the UK, it was I had taken 2 steps back, to an extent, because there's a lot of clients I could no longer work with, and I had to put new clients here in the UK, so it was difficult. So I started working for Apple for a couple of years, which was fantastic, working in Apple retail. But I remember I just mentioned in passing to one of the Apple staff that at the Justin Timberlake gig that I also worked for Apple, and they started having a mild freak out. They were like, "Are you supposed to be here? Is this a conflict of interest?" I was like, "Whoa, hold on, my store, no." But it nearly created a situation where I wasn't able to shoot a gig, and I was like, "Never volunteer too much information destination, the wrong people. Because you have to know where to draw the line. Because I knew it was fine. I cleared it with Apple. That even though I was an Apple employee, I was working at this Apple event, but not for Apple. It was grand, but Apple's a big company, with a lot of different people. So
Sure.
I learned a little bit about knowing when to hold back.
And carry pieces of paper around with authorization for everything.
Yeah, 100%, exactly. Especially with a big event like that.
So you spoke about Apple there and like being a gig, and you spoke about the cameras that you've used, the A7R4 and the A7R3 and the A7S2, and also we spoke towards the beginning about the 85mm and how much you love it. And so could we go into a bit, like there's a lot of gearheads who watch this, like they want to know about specs and how the cameras perform, and then also if we can touch on, because you mentioned it in the Friday show, about taking the 85 and making it do something that you'd never expect an 85mm to be used for, i.e. amazing panorama shots of live music events.
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, I'll go through kind of my what's in my bag. So, as much as I have said about earlier on about it being too easy to use the 24-70 too much, I always have one in the bag, and I very often have it on one of those cameras, because once you learn to use it properly and not just zoom and click, it is a great lens to have. It's just important not to fall into the trap of just zooming and clicking and not thinking. So a 24-70 is an important part of my arsenal because it's a lens which can adapt to a wide variety of different scenarios at any given moment, particularly when I have it on one camera body. And then in the other camera, I'll often either have like the 85, like I said, or I'll have 12-24 Sony as well, which I adore that lens, and just how kind of the lack of distortion when it's super wide. And although it's f4, that doesn't, it doesn't bother me, because ISO performance is so good these days that f4 is usable in a way it wasn't usable 7 years ago. So it's like all this old gear, and even you can buy in charity shops that's like, f4 to 5.6 is suddenly viable gear now that wasn't really viable in the past, which is great. Yeah. It's great for people starting out as well. I also have a 70-200, which is fantastic for at big venues, for maybe which have a big distance between the pit and the stage, or for creating the same level of intimacy in a shot, which I would normally have used an 85 to get. So it gives me that bit longer range. But it can also be great for, even in smaller venues, getting the detail shots like hands on a guitar strings.
Is that the 2.8 or the f4?
Yes, 2.8 that I have. I adore that lens as well. So my main ones that are in the camera bag are like 24-70, 85, 12-24, and the what was the one I'm not saying?
70-200.
70-200. Yes, thank you. I have a 50 mil Minolta as well that I use with an adapter, but that I will probably I'll be replacing that with a Sony 50 back when gigs get going again. That's the plan. It was something I was just about to do, but held off because obviously this is difficult times for everyone, including myself. So it's not a good time for me to be spending any money on any gear or anything like that. Definitely not required for me right now. But yeah, think you mentioned about the lenses. I don't know if you have one of the images you could bring up here or not, or but it was in the previous video. I had an elbow gig a couple of years, or back in, I think it was 2019 or 2018. I had this thought about using this 85 at 1.4, which that lens is lovely at 1.4. I was on the R3, I believe, at the time, shooting panoramas, across the stage and the crowd at that shallow focal length to make a 7 or 8 image or even wider panorama that is a gigantic number of megapixels, but gives you the feel of a long focal length image in a wide shot, a shallow depth of field that you would never get with a 24-70, for instance. So when people look at it, that like it looks nice, but you know that there's something unusual. It looks cinematic because of it. It looks like a super large format sensor essentially. So that's something I've really enjoyed doing. Now I can probably, if you don't have one, I can send you one in the link if you don't have one in there. So I will just bring that up here. 1 second.
There is.
Sony.
And just whilst you're doing that, do you use the built-in panorama mode, or do you do it yourself? Do you take each individual shot yourself?
Oh, I take it myself. Always take it myself, and then just pivot on my hip, and just move slowly and fire off several shots. I'm pasting you a couple of Dropbox links to a couple of different examples here, which might be worth. So here's the second one. So you've got 2 there now.
Yep.
Which are 2 examples of it. Just give for anybody who if people want to see more about the process, they can go back and look at the other video. But just to give a little preview of it, there might be worth if you can hit. Yeah, exactly.
That's a great image.
Yeah. So
see, it gives you an effect that you just, if you aren't a photographer, you can still appreciate it. But as any photographer who looks at it will know there's something going on there, because you're just not going to get that shallow depth of field at that.
I said to Joel straight away, I said, there's something nicely odd about this photo that I don't understand, and I want to know what's going on. And then you showed the photos first, and then sort of explained sort of what was going on afterwards. And I was just like, what is going on here? And it was like,
what is this witchcraft?
My favourite one was the BBC Studio one. I think that was just. That was magical.
I love that one. That was with Elbow in what's the name of the studio? Not Abbey Road. I can't remember the name of it. Somebody. It's just as iconic as Abbey Road, but I just can't think of the name. Hold on. It's something Vale. Made of Vale.
Yeah.
And I've just popped it in the chat as well. If you want to stick it up on the thingamajig.
Where was this one of the script?
I think it was either O2 London or O2 Dublin.
I love the fact that they've obviously all got their
London
torches on their phones and stuff, and the fact that you've managed to obviously shoot it at a shallow depth of field, and it's bokeh all those. It almost looks like, well, we were talking with Sam earlier about Sigma flexing this time of year, because the fairy lights look so cool with the shallow depth of field and the bokeh circles, and it's like that, isn't it? Almost like a load of fairy lights behind the crowd, which looks really cool. And
the shot is so high res. I mean, it's ludicrous. Like the full res
detail in the people in the front.
Yeah, well, if you zoom in the high res, I mean, it crashes Lightroom when I open up the floor. It's and you can see like the drummer. That's just a low res version I sent you, super low res. But the actual the uncompressed one, and maximum res is like 40,000, 50,000 pixels wide. I can't remember that off the top of my head.
Crazy. It'd have so many shots in.
Right, one more.
And the Maida Vale ones were sticking up, I think.
Yeah,
that's the last link.
I just really like this one. Yeah, that's the one. I just think that's awesome. Just because I think because there's foreground blur and background blur to it. It's just, it feels to me like it looks like a video could pan across it. Do you know what I mean? Like if it was like a record, that's how it would pass like through the section of it.
Yeah, so when you're making it, to feel like you're capturing a moment in time, even though what you're capturing is several moments, because it's probably a 15-second lag or 10-second lag between the first and the last picture. So because I'm just going across and click, 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 and then trying to keep as keep as rigid as possible. so that you can have a better chance of stitching it.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think those panoramics are just
definitely.
Just definitely
Makes you want to try it in like different circumstances,
Yeah,
like
no,
at a
does.
wedding.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, definitely. Yeah, you should definitely. People should try it. I mean, I do explain it a little bit more in the video, and then even more on my own YouTube channel. One of the videos, I kind of go into a lot of depth about the actual process. So if anyone wants to try it, they can just have a look and they'll find it there.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But yeah, it's becoming a trademark thing that I kind of do for clients now, which is nice to have little things, like that.
It is. Well, it's just like, it's like other sort of USP for you, isn't it? That you can sort of say to a client, it's just like, oh, we can provide you with this image that looks different for, for technical reasons, but it does the it does the job.
Yeah. And they can look really nice in tour programs as well. Especially if you pan it across 2 pages.
Brad and
that's cool.
Ooh, yeah, exactly.
There's going to be a lot of panorama shots at 85mm going on around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do it.
So before we finish, obviously we've asked you quite a few questions about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And are there any questions that we haven't asked that like you've always wanted to answer, or like that you think would be helpful to people having heard your story of getting into the industry and the funny moments that you've experienced and building relationships, etc. And you've told us the gear that you use, so we've got a good idea of what's in your camera bag and how you achieve such shots as those like 85mm panos. Like, is there anything else that you think would be helpful to our lovely audience?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, you have to think about, it's very easy when you're trying to get into the music industry, and it is a hard industry to get into, to think about just the shots. But what you actually have to think about is you have to think of the whole package. And part of that is, it's kind of a political thing, but knowing what battles to fight and what for argument's sake, if I'm at a gig and I've been cleared to go into a particular particular area, if I meet resistance from a security person, what I do now and what I've learned to do over the years is to say instantly, fine, no problem, and then go, get either, if I know, I would generally know the name of the supervisor, so I'd ask them, we say, would you mind radioing Sheila or Mike or whoever it is, and they'll verify that I'm cleared to be here. And that's, so knowing when to kind of like to step back is kind of a big thing, because at the end of the day, if you start being arsey with someone in that scenario, they'll just kick you out of the venue. And so that's a big part of it. Second is, I mean, obviously you kind of, I know it sounds, but there are little things you can do. Like when I'm emailing a potential client, I don't do a big long email. I'll try and put like, one image at the first thing in the email, and then a bit of text below. Or even, and this is going to sound possibly a bit dishonest, but one of the best things that you can do with when you're emailing somebody cold that's your potential client is to actually put at the beginning of the subject line colon and like photos or something like that, because when they see it, they feel, oh shit, this is obviously something I'm supposed to get back to. So you're way more likely to get a response. So it's
really urgent exclamation.
Yeah, exactly. You heard it here. But yeah, that's little things like that are a big thing. Or it's knowing about what's important to who in the industry. So for instance, record labels are not good people to ask for photo passes, but record labels make their money off album sales, not live tours. So they don't give a toss about tours. So very often, if you're, who you want to be talking to is other people who have vested interests in it. And it's not necessarily the band directly. It might be the social media firm who's on a retainer to content, social media content every month, so you go on, you figure out who the social media firm is by just Googling. You won't always find it, but often you will. The same thing about approaching the merchandise company, approaching hardware brands for guitars, Nord keyboards, or like I said, stage designers. So you have to kind of think outside of the box. and and kind of be humble, but at the same time not kissing their arse. So it's kind of delicate balance.
It's an ecosystem, isn't it?
It really is.
If you go into the mind of like, I'm just going to go in for what I need and not think about what everyone else sort of potentially needs from it, so
if you can figure out the benefits for others and big up the benefits of choosing you over somebody else, like I suppose it's even easier for you now, given the fact that you can say, well, I've worked with all these guys for like several years. I think I can help you as a social media company achieve really good results for you as a company with this band. So if you get me on board, I'll get you great content, which will keep you with that job or that like contract. So actually, whilst I'm getting paid, but you're paying me to help you keep your job, keep your contract with the band.
But that's exactly it. And where so many people just try and contact either the promoter and don't get me wrong, that works sometimes, but that's a road that's super well traveled in comparison to these other routes, which are not as well traveled, and you're more likely to stand out because simply it happens less.
100%.
Well, that's brilliant. It's sound advice there.
Yeah. Do you want to get into the music industry now?
I had a dabble.
Yeah.
And it's hard. So
I think it would be really exciting.
Just do it. It's good fun.
It is hit for a few bands that like to go to this level and be on tour and live and breathe a whole tour with a band must be an awesome feeling, but difficult at the same time, like tiring, long hours and stuff. But
it's what's good though. It's great. It's funny. I thought you mentioned earlier, the difficulties you have in kids, in this environment. I mean, I love my kids to bits, and my kids are the kind of the most important thing in my world. But they're also a great grander because no matter how good a picture is, I'll show it to my kids and they'll say, "That's shit, Daddy." I was just like, that's exactly what I need, So at the end of the day, what I do is not as important as a doctor. It's not as important as the NHS. It's not as important as all these different, there's a billion other things. And hopefully it's part of something that is important. It contributes to a cultural record, and that's the most I can hope to do. But I think COVID's given a lot of people perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously there's a lot of people who do a lot of really tough jobs, but equally those people who have finished a hard shift, like being able to either watch a video about their favorite band or a picture grabs them in Spotify or any other available music app, and they think, oh, I'm going to listen to that song by The Script because that's like really gets me going after a hard shift. Like, I think that's important, like that ecosystem again, but how that everything we do interrelates to other people. And whilst it doesn't seem important at that moment because you're not necessarily saving lives, but being like, I think this is the important thing to understand with the arts and culture and media is that those are what gets people excited. Like, do you know what I mean? Like listening to music lifts the soul, or looking at awesome artwork or photography, or being able to go and walk through a pretty garden. All of these things are what makes us human, isn't it? Like, gives 100%. Us the feelings, as the kids might say. Yeah. And I think that's important to understand. That's why we, as a business, at least, care more about driving the passion of photography than selling gear, because ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you're using a smartphone or a compact camera, a bridge camera, or a 10 grand camera. If you can capture a moment or you can make an image that gives you that moment in 10, 20 years time when that person you've been with isn't there anymore, and you can go back and reminisce. I feel like that for me is what gets me up in the morning and makes me enjoy my job, is the fact that I'm helping people through memories. So I'm not saving people's lives, but equally I think those shots, like history is amazing now, isn't it? For the past 150 years or whatever, we've had photographs that we can go back in time and almost be there without being able to. Like the word wouldn't have done for us, or even music in the same way. I think it's.
No, I think you're right.
I love the visual image. That beauty of memories.
It plays its part in that.
Definitely.
In like that ecosystem that is there. So, Well, that's brilliant, Pete. It's been lovely.
I feel like we could speak for another few hours.
I know, yeah.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
It's really
great.
cool.
Yeah, not only gracing us with coming on today as well, but
On Friday
big
as
thank
well,
you
yeah.
for doing the video on Friday for us as well. So
Cool.
we've had a double
a double whammy of
it.
Pete.
Yeah.
I was going to say Pete sandwich, but no. I said that was it's, you're like, and then like I'm like wiped. You never see me again.
Oh
That's
dear.
brilliant.
But massive thank you. And so we'll drop you off the screen now, and we'll catch up with you in a moment.
No
See you in a
problem.
sec.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye. That's really got you tickled.
Still composing myself after a pizza sandwich.
So thank you for joining us for this one. If you didn't watch the one on Friday, definitely worth a watch. I think it would be worth a watch of this again. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I found it very inspiring and also helpful to remember that whilst you've not got it right every time now, hopefully the experience in the future will get you to a place further on down the road.
Indeed.
So make sure 7 o'clock tonight to join us for Gary Jones, the wildlife photographer. That's going to be really interesting on safaris.
Yeah.
His stuff is fantastic and such a great person to like speak to. We know him really well, but also just to listen to him is very good. And I'm sure he'll mention it, but in the future, like if you can get on one of his workshops, that would be like ideal. So definitely catch us at 7 p.m. tonight. And then we'll announce some more people for tomorrow because we've got a good solid lineup as we have for the past few days, all the way through to Saturday. So do you want to do your
I can do a thing.
Your likey bit.
So if you want to find out more about Gary's talk or any of the other talks that we've got for our virtual show, you can go over to the website, which is cambriaphoto.co.uk. Click on the guest speakers and there's a full list there that you can enjoy. Please make sure that you like and share this video. The more that you do, the more it helps us. Go over to our Facebook and YouTube channels. Make sure that you subscribe and hit the notifications so you know when we're going live. We'll see you later on.
Cheers. Bye-bye.